Folkman webinar series. I am Jared Harding, Vice President of Marketing and Biz Dev here at Sanger Folkman, and I am grateful that you're willing to share some time with us to explore this topic, the trifecta of trust. Now, before we jump right into this topic, I want to share just one thing that makes Sanger Folkman unique when it comes to leadership development. And that is that we know it is a fact that all leadership behaviors are not created equal. In fact, there was a McKinsey leadership development study that was done where they found that your leadership development program is 8 times more likely to succeed if your organization focuses on the most critical leadership behaviors that really matter to performance and are also based on fact-based research. 8 times. And now we have certainly seen that when working with our clients, because that's our point of view, right? We definitely believe in using leadership competencies that make a difference and that were discovered as such through really good scientific research. So I'm going to be a bit bold here and say that your executives' war stories and their personal leadership journey that has really kind of formed their opinion of what critical leadership behaviors should become the company model is not fact-based research. I believe it's well-intended. I believe that it does have some value, but when you're looking at what's really going to make a difference, that's not fact-based research. And I'm not even going to talk about the concept of doing a card sort activity on competencies. But if you want to leverage leadership to drive change, productivity, to create a positive employee experience across your organization, then you really do need to start with relevant, validated behaviors that actually make a difference. All right, so I'm going to step down from my soapbox, but I do invite you that if this resonates with you, we'd love to talk with you, and we'd love to share our research around leadership competencies and those that make a difference based on what we see from our global data set. All right, so let's jump into this. Topic on trust, and we're going to start out with what is trust? And trust can be really kind of difficult to put your finger on. It is this logical process where we mentally kind of start to weigh out pros and cons. But often you hear people say something like, I don't know why, but I do not trust that guy, right? So at some point is then trust kind of an emotional instinct as well. And so trust is interesting because it is a little bit of both. We use logical assessments and data, and we kind of weigh whether or not to place trust, but we rarely have perfect or complete data. So ultimately, the decision to trust also requires, a kind of emotional response. So a simple definition that really kind of resonated with me was this one. Trust is a willingness to accept vulnerability based on positive expectations of someone else. So being willing to trust means accepting the risk of betrayal, right? You're vulnerable. And I actually read this psychology article that went pretty in depth about the differences between being betrayed and being disappointed. And I probably spent a little bit too much time on it, but it did convince me the difference between betrayal and disappointment when it comes to trust. And so if you think about it, if you're not open to the risk of betrayal, then you really aren't extending trust. Or if the circumstance is such that you can't be betrayed, then it's also a circumstance that doesn't require trust. Right? So I like to think of this is a little bit, the difference between this is like if a team member shows up 10 minutes late to work, then you're disappointed, right? But certainly not betrayed. Where if that same team member takes all the credit for your good idea, that's a definite betrayal, right? So you kind of see the difference here. So then why now is trust so critical in the workplace? I believe it's pretty safe to say that everyone agrees trust is important. It's important to our work environments. It's important to our work relationships. We know we need other people to help us achieve the outcomes that we value and that the organization would value. So there's been a significant amount of research, as you would imagine, around trust. And there was one particular piece I found that talks about 3 basic things that trust does in the lives of people. And so number 1, it makes life predictable. Now, this really allows people to synchronize their actions and work efficiently because they have a level of expectation and predictability about how other people are going to respond and react. So then it helps us be able to be focused and work efficiently. Second, it creates a sense of community. So high degrees of trust, right? That's going to create shared emotional connection. The idea of creating value for each other, with each other, and allow us to kind of understand what the appropriate conforming behaviors are. If you think of that, it's like if you go to a dance party and you see one person, dancing around in the middle of the room, and then someone else joins, and then everyone joins. That's because that's appropriate conforming behavior at a dance party. And you trust that no one's going to make fun of you because that's why you go to a dance party, right? So trust really creates that sense of community in a work environment where people are then able to see what are the conforming behaviors where they can maybe go and even take some risks, do things to push the envelope in terms of innovation, but it's a part of that community and that sense of creating value. And then last thing, the third thing, is it makes it easier for people to work together. Trust allows for greater focus. It gives space for that innovation and that creativity. It increases engagement. And that support that people are able to provide each other really reduces the stress, the anxiety that can be felt in a low trust environment. So it makes it easier for people to work together. So a little bit more on some trust data. There's this gentleman, Paul Zak, and he's an American neuroeconomist. I did not know what a neuroeconomist was before I was introduced to Paul Zak, but basically he uses neuroscience to understand consumer decisions. And so he's really done some very interesting things. And his name is two first names, Paul Zak. So anyone that has two first names, I think, gets an automatic head start in life. But his team conducted some research where they calculated the level of trust for organizations, and then they compared the top quartile or high trust companies to the bottom quartile or low trust companies. And employees who were at companies that were in that top quartile, who worked for high trust companies, reported some very interesting things. So we're going to point some of these out here. First, they reported 40% less burnout. They reported 66% more closeness with colleagues, 106% more energy, 70% more alignment with companies, with the company's purpose, and then one more, 17% higher compensation than peers in low trust companies. So clearly, I mean, just from his findings, you can see the impact that trust has on an organization, on employees of that organization, how productive they are, how aligned they are with your strategy or your purpose. And then that last one, that 17% higher compensation, Paul Zak says that the only way, right, that this can occur in a competitive environment is if employees in high trust companies simply are more productive, more innovative. And that makes sense. You can't just pay employees more because you want to or because it makes them feel better. But if they're more productive, if they're more innovative, then that higher compensation is worth it because they're able to create more value. So clearly, trust is critical to organizations being successful, organizations growing. And now we believe that high trust organizations are made up of high trust leaders. You're not going to find a high trust organization that has low trust leaders, right? So the angle that we're going to take on how do you become a high trust organization is you really need to focus on your leaders and help your leaders become high trust leaders. So now we want to share some Sanger-Folkman data with you. And we've collected data here. You can see this on over 87,000 leaders where trust is incredibly positively correlated with overall leadership effectiveness. Very strong positive correlation here. And you can see where if you're really good at trust and you're in the top percentile, then you're also very high on your overall leadership effectiveness. Where if you're low on trust, right, the bottom 10th percentile, then you're low on your overall leadership effectiveness. So trust really is a key predictor in terms of how good a leader is overall. So then, if you look at this next study that we've done around direct reports, and we're looking at leaders and whether or not they're a high trust leader, and then the amount of discretionary effort that they're willing to give. So in this case, direct reports who worked for a high trust leader reported 3.5 times more willingness to give discretionary effort. Where if you compare that to low trust leaders, the low trust leaders only had 17% of their direct team report kind of that willingness to give discretionary effort, to go the extra mile. And we really call that your certificate of participation. Even if you're a low trust leader, which in the previous data set would show you that you're also overall not a very good leader, then you still are just going to, by luck of the draw, have one person, a couple people on your team that it's just innate in them to work hard. But it makes a big difference if you're a high trust leader, because then, now you're going to have 60, 70% of your team really willing to go the extra mile. And I think we all know what it's like to be on a team that's like that, where you work for a leader that you trust, you're working with colleagues and peers where you're excited, you're engaged, you're kind of willing to do whatever it takes to achieve the goals and the objectives. And that's a team that people want to be a part of. So employees simply work harder when they work with a high trust leader. So I don't think that any of these things are surprising. I think we kind of know this, and the data really just validates what we already believe. But what's interesting is that when trust is lost, we're never really quite clear usually what caused the problem. Unless you purposely betrayed someone, then you would know. Outside of that, sometimes it's a mystery to us, right? Why we don't have the level of trust that we would like. And so, we kind of know when trust is there and when it isn't, but it's hard to put your finger on why. So we took a look into our data set to really analyze how trust is built, where trust can fall apart. And so looking at that data set of over 87,000 leaders where we had this multi-rater feedback, right? Feedback from their peers, direct reports, their managers, we found that there were 3 key clusters of items around trust. And we also found that all 3 of these elements need to be present for high trust to exist. And so these three elements, the 3 keys of trust, are build positive relationships, exercise expertise and good judgment, and demonstrate consistency. And so we're going to talk through each one of these a little bit more in depth. So we're going to start with build positive relationships. So this is the extent to which a leader is really able to create positive relationships with other people, other groups. And so some of the things, behaviors that we found in our database that make up this dimension are things like staying in touch with the issues of others and concerns of others, balancing the results with concern for others, generating cooperation, resolving conflict, giving honest feedback. And so it's clear to see that, if you think about this dimension of building positive relationships, if it is absent, then you have a leader who really isn't seeking or even interested in positive relationships. And you may have a person who's good at their job, who consistently seeks the right results, but may leave a lot of bodies in the wake. So the focus on results or process really kind of ends up outweighing the need to develop others, understand others, even cooperate with others. And that is not someone we're inclined to trust. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Exercise expertise and good judgment. So this is the extent to which a leader is knowledgeable. They're well informed. They understand the technical aspects of the job, and they really have a good depth of expertise. So some of the behaviors that we identified around this dimension are things like using good judgment when making decisions. People really trust their opinions. They seek out those opinions. The knowledge and expertise that someone has contributes to the results. And in this dimension, people are able to anticipate and respond quickly to problems. So now, if expertise and good judgment are absent, then you have someone who cares. So they care about relationships, and they're trying to be consistent, trying to get things done, but the things that they do just don't hit the mark. They're not good enough. And oftentimes, that's someone that we don't trust as well. We're not able to trust that they're able to deliver the results because they're lacking. But that's also a difficult situation because they're a nice person. They do care about relationships. They're trying to be consistent, but it's hard for us to be vocal with them and give them honest feedback because they are nice and they are trying. All right, so then the third dimension, demonstrating consistency. This is really the extent to which leaders walk the talk. They do what they say they're going to do. So some of the behaviors in this dimension, this person is typically a role model. They set a good example. They honor their commitments and keep promises. They follow through on those commitments, and they're really willing to do whatever it takes, go above and beyond to get things done. So if consistency is absent, then you really have a person where their heart is in the right place, they're good at what they do, but they can't deliver with regularity. So you know the person cares about it, you know they have the expertise, but the follow-through just isn't there. Maybe they're too easily distracted, who knows, but it's difficult to trust them because you don't know if they're going to be able to come through or not, deliver on time, on target. So the absence of any one of these elements can lead to trust problems. And once the source of mistrust is really identified, then it's your opportunity to go work on it. It becomes a lot easier to then improve the situation when you think about it in these three dimensions. And so they really are the trifecta of trust, the perfect three. And as I mentioned earlier, our research shows that all three are required. You have to have all three to be a high trust leader. So just think to yourself for a second, which of these behaviors do you think would make the most difference if you're going to kind of choose one? And so now I'm going to show you just some of the additional research we kind of separated this out a little bit around what makes the most difference. But I think this will also highlight the importance of all three. So first, if you are above average in building positive relationships, but not in the other two, then you would be at the 52nd percentile on trust, so just about average. Now, if you're above average in exercising expertise and judgment, but not the other two, then you'd be at the 36th percentile on trust. And if you are above average in consistency, but not the other two, then you would be at the 32nd percentile on trust. So if you think about this, relationships clearly makes the most impact. If you have that one alone, you're going to be average at trust, but only average. And the other two, you're not even average, right? You're in the 30s percentile on trust, so well below average. So relationships certainly makes the biggest difference, but it doesn't get you to be a high trust leader alone. So what was interesting is we also did the same kind of research here, but we looked at pairs. So if you were just missing one. So let's take a look at some of these pairings and how it might make a difference. So if you're above average, as you can see here, in build positive relationships and exercising expertise and good judgment, but not consistency, then you would be at the 63rd percentile on trust. All right, so a little above average. Now, if you're good at or above average in relationships and consistency, but not in expertise and judgment, you'd be at the 59th percentile on trust. And then lastly, if you are above average in exercising expertise and judgment and in consistency, but not in building relationships, then you'd be at the 48th percentile on trust. So even just getting two of these dimensions and being a little above average in two, it'll get you at best a little bit above average, but most likely right around average. You're not a high trust leader even if you have two. So you really do need all three of these dimensions to become a high trust leader. So now we want to show you overall how this kind of looks, right? So if you're a little bit above average, and what we measured was at the 60th percentile, so just a little bit above average in all three of these dimensions, then where does that place you for trust as a leader? And what we found is that it puts you at the 80th percentile on trust, right? So that's huge. So all you have to do, and this is a little bit of a difference from where we typically fall, right? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a profound strength in any of these dimensions. You just have to be a little bit above average, but you do have to be a little above average in all three, and then you can be a high trust leader. Now contrast that to where if you're a little below average, right? So we looked at this at the 40th percentile. If you're a little below average in all three, how does that impact your trust? And check this out, you drop all the way to the 20th percentile for trust. So if you're a little above average in all three, you're a high trust leader. But if you're a little below average in all three, you are a low trust leader. So it makes a big difference. And this really demonstrates the requirement of having all three present and being a little above average in all three. And like I said, this is one thing I love about working at Zenger Folkman is that we really go where the data tells us to go. So our data on trust is different from how we view overall leadership. In overall leadership, we believe that you really need to focus on your strengths, develop a profound strength, and that's the pathway to becoming an extraordinary leader. However, with trust, when we're just focused on trust and looking at these three dimensions, it's different. You don't need a profound strength. And you do need to fix weaknesses. You cannot have a low score when we're talking about trust. So this is an instance where the data suggests that you need to find your weakest link and then bring that up to become a high trust leader. So that really leads us into the next question, right? So if we've talked about this, we've found these three dimensions, well, how do you do it? How do you become a high trust leader? And the end goal, of course, is that leaders need to be a bit above average in all three behaviors. And as you think about, feedback that you've been given from others, maybe how you like to work, then you need to select which of those three do you feel like you could work on that would have the most positive impact on how others perceive you and would be able to place trust in you. And then find that dimension and work on it. We've got a great little survey on trust. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to reach out to us and we can share that with you. And that can give you a little bit of self-awareness about these three. But the big question is once you do find that one area that you want to work on, if it's building relationships, if it's consistency, well then, so now what? What do you do? And I believe this is the greatest contribution that Dr. Jack Zenger and Dr. Joe Folkman have made to the leadership development space. And this is really the discovery of empirically derived companion behaviors. And so oftentimes what happens is you would identify an area, you'd say, okay, I know what it is. I need to be better at building positive relationships. That's what I'm going to work on. I'm excited about it. And then you go off to your job. And then we miss this very important step of being able to translate that idea, that goal, into really meaningful action. And so what these companion behavior research and methodology does is it helps leaders take that next step by identifying what are those specific actions, what are the things that you can do that will help you actually improve and have successful development. And this is very similar to kind of like athletic cross-training, where if you want to get elite at a core sport, there are these other activities that you can do that correlate, whether it's weightlifting or whatever, that can make you better at your core sport. And that's how these companion behaviors work. This is research where we looked at a core behavior and we looked at what are the other behaviors that have the strongest connection, the highest correlation in terms of where if the leader is demonstrating high competence in one, they're also demonstrating high competence in another. And if you can use these companion behaviors to focus in on, then we've been able to demonstrate that's the best way for you to create some really good improvement around that core behavior. So for each element of the trifecta of trust, we've identified the top 4 most predictive companion behaviors. And so I'm going to go ahead and share that list. And we've got a resource for you to download as well that will be available on the webpage where you're viewing this. So for build positive relationships, here we've got 4. The first is coach and develop others. So developing others, especially those on your team, excellent way in which you're going to improve trust and build relationships. The second, inspire and motivate others. For many, the default method for motivating is to push and drive for results. But another way is to pull and to get people excited about an assignment. Third behavior, communicate powerfully. So improving that flow and the frequency of communication can do a lot to improve trust through your relationships. And then lastly is ask for feedback. And so this clearly sends the message that you are interested and you care about how you interact with others, what other people think, and people want to trust, or people are easier to trust, I should say, easier to trust someone that is looking for ways to improve, that knows they're not perfect, right? So there's your top 4 behaviors for build relationships. right? So how about exercising expertise and good judgment? So we've got improved cooperation. And right, poor cooperation quickly will erode trust on your team and even create an environment that's competitive and defensive. So trust is really at the heart of cooperation, and that's built through common goals that allows for the best ideas to come forward and bringing people together. The second one, resolve conflict. Conflict rarely resolves itself. So in this instance, you're going to use your expertise and your good judgment to find shared values, to be able to move conflict into an opportunity for positive change. And teams that are able to resolve conflict have a higher degree of trust with each other. The third one, communicate the vision. Sometimes we just get so caught up with our day-to-day that we forget to connect the details to the big picture. And employees will have greater trust when they understand not just how to row the boat, but where that boat is headed. So communicate the vision. Then lastly, be coachable. So being coachable, again, it acknowledges that you value an outside perspective. You may be an expert, and you may be able to use good judgment, but being coachable shows that you're also interested in continuing to learn and having other people also help support you in your ability to grow and improve. Right, so there's your top 4 for exercising expertise and good judgment. So how about demonstrating consistency? Number 1 is to ask for feedback. And we've seen that one before, but this is a little bit different under consistency because sometimes it's hard to see our own inconsistencies. So in this, under consistency, you got to think about this. You're going to foster trust by allowing and encouraging others to let you know when you're inconsistent, when you're saying one thing and doing another. The second is to resolve conflict. It can be so, so tempting to ignore conflict, and a part of being consistent is building trust by addressing conflict as soon as you can, as soon as possible. Third is keeping others informed. Leaders get busy, everyone gets busy, and sometimes we just assume that people know about maybe new decisions that are made or understand what recent changes mean. And so part of being consistent and building trust through consistency is taking the time to share, to listen, and understand everyone's point of view and make sure that that flow of information is present. And then last, connect to the strategy. And when thinking about this through consistency, right, this is building trust through repetition. I don't know that a leader can talk too much about the strategy and how things are building towards the strategy. Consistently connecting decisions and actions will build trust in your leadership and in the direction that we're headed. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've got this resource. And so we've created a Trifecta of Trust Development Guide. And this is available as a PDF that you can download on the website where you're watching this. And what we've created is show the top 4 companion behaviors for each of the dimensions of the Trifecta of Trust. And then we've listed 3 kind of very specific ways that you might set a goal to be better at that particular companion behavior, right? Something like in your next one-on-one, set a goal to avoid giving advice and support others in discovering solutions on their own. So kind of more specific goals. So I encourage you to download that and take a look at what those suggestions would be. So I hope you can really see how this companion behavior methodology and research is using data and science, but it helps people have a clearer starting point. So now you chose that build positive relationships is the area that you want to focus on, but now you've got a really actionable, practical way to move forward and some new ideas that you can go try, new behaviors that you can begin to implement. All right, so in conclusion here, there's this question, can leaders, can they actually improve their trust? Is that possible? And we did a study, just over 900 leaders, and we looked at the pretest scores on these leaders, and their level of trust was at the 31st percentile. And the item that we were looking at is their level of trust were they trusted by all members of their work group. And so they took this test, they had an opportunity to implement a development plan, and I don't know the exact time frame, but typically it's about 12 to 18 months between pre and post tests. But after they had their opportunity to implement a development plan, and we did a post test, check this out, they increased to the 67th percentile on average, right, as in terms of their level of being trusted by all members of their work group. So can leaders improve their trust? Absolutely yes. Clearly, the data shows that it's possible, and the data also shows that the trifecta of trust is the requirement. You need all three of those behaviors. And if you can get, again, above average in all three, then you have the ability to be a high trust leader. And so also, though, if you feel like trust has been lost, the trifecta of trust is a really simple formula that will help you identify where things may have gone wrong, and then where you can kind of go as a starting point to repair trust. So our final quote for today comes from the late Peter Drucker, and he says, "Leadership is an achievement of trust." And we strongly believe that trust inside a company starts with its leaders. If you have high trust leaders, you will have a high trust organization. And that's an organization that will get better results. It's an organization where people will want to work. And that's what we all want. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for wanting to make your organization a more inspiring place to work.